Kimberly Mendoza. Welcome so much to this brand new channel. The focus of this channel is going to be all about Generation Z and how to engage them. And honestly, I'm going to talk about other generations as well on here. So if you're really interested in generations, that'll be on here as well. But most of my research has been on Generation Z. And so I like to help people because there is such a huge gap between baby boomers and post-millennials. There's this huge gap. There's a gap even between millennials and baby boomers, Gen Z and millennials and post-millennials. And just for the record, Generation Z is the post-millennials. They are not millennials. They're completely different, which we will talk about on this channel. But if you are a teacher, a pastor, you're a parent, there's so many different people that are interacting with this new generation that don't know what to do, an employer, this channel is for you. And because we're going to go through all of it. Now, I will give you the disclaimer that my research has mostly been on how to handle them in the classroom, but I think it will also help people that are in other arenas as well. I don't know if you have heard, but I actually have a book out, and I will have a link for it at the very end of this podcast that you can always purchase if you would like to, called Teaching Squirrels. It goes into the things I'm going to talk about even deeper. And if you have somebody who is really struggling with Gen Z, then I highly recommend you get that book for them or tell them about this channel. Like it, subscribe it. I'm going to try to share with you as much as I possibly can, and hopefully my research will help you as well. So let's get into it. Who is this generation? A lot of people ask me, well, when were they born? And so you're looking at 1995 to 2010 is this generation. Now, I will tell you, because of COVID, there is a little bit of a split between this generation. It's no different than the baby boomers. Even though the baby boomers goes from 1940 to 1965, you will find that the 1940 generation, the people born in the 40s, are different than the 50s to the 60s. That's just how generations kind of go, is, they might be all in one generation, but there tends to be a little bit of a split. My son, it's funny because I am a X-Gen. My husband is a baby boomer. My oldest son is kind of on the border. We call them border years, where they're sitting right between millennial and post-millennial, or some other, one where they're on a border year. A lot of times they take on attributions from both sides. And then my youngest son is textbook Z generation. And even he says that the younger people, he doesn't fully understand them. And so I do think there is a distinction between the young Zers and the older Zers and how they process what they do, all of that. So, all right. So who are they? They are basically the first generation born with the internet. They have so many different names that have been applied to them over the years, but the two that I will use for this podcast are either post-millennial or Gen Z. They are really into instant gratification, and that comes from years of when they push something, it happens, right? They're the microwave generation. They're the generation that has instant information and has, DoorDash coming straight to their house. And if somebody did not want to leave their home ever, they possibly could do that. And so that instant generation has caused instant gratification, and they have no time for slow processes. That's really hard for basically everybody who has had to wait through the processes through life. And so we'll get into that. Their aspirations to be part of the solution. They're not the kind of people that want to sit by and just watch. They want to be part of it because they have had so much, response to everything they do. I mean, think about it, and we'll get into this more later, but they vote on everything. It used to be a very passive society. Things came in our mailbox, and if we liked them, we just didn't buy from them again. Now, if you don't like them, they can go vote on you. And so they're part of the process. It's an interaction between the two. They are the most racially and ethnically diverse group of people that have ever been born. And maybe the alphas are more. That's the generation right underneath them is the alpha generation. But they are very diverse, which means because of the different cultures and diversity, there's different mindsets. Their mindsets are going to be different and more fluid. And even if they weren't diverse. They also have the internet that shows them different cultures and ways of thinking and mindsets across the nation, across the world. And so for that reason, they are being trained by multiple cultures, not just one. They have lots of perspectives because of this as well. And so sometimes their line of thinking doesn't make sense to the people within their community because of how they are being raised by the world and not by their community, like had happened so often right in the past. And then they're actually on track to be the most educated generation of all time, partly if you don't know it, you Google it. And they love to learn. They may not like to learn in an hour-and-a-half class where there's no interaction, but they do love to learn, and they want, it in short little spurts, but ultimately they love to learn. All right. So, we know that they struggle with attention span. There's a reason why I call this channel Squirrels, and in my book is called Squirrels, because like a squirrel, they have a low attention span, and we'll get into that more too. Actually, you know what? I'll get into that right now. So I don't know if you know that, but a squirrel's attention span is supposed to be less than a second. But if you give them an acorn, it goes up to 4 minutes. And so Generation Z's attention span, I believe, is now at 7 seconds. So, if you're talking or doing anything more than 7 seconds without something else happening, you basically have lost them. So for that reason, we have to find their acorns. And that's basically what this channel is all about. Let's help you find the acorns and find ways to engage them so you understand how to help them. Though they are viewed themselves as independent people, they are willing to learn only if it will take little time. And that's really hard because we have been in the trenches and we've been working towards it for all these generations. And then we have someone who comes in and they want it instantly. And I'm not telling you that we need to cater to them. I'm just telling you what the expectation is, so that you can work through that expectation and maybe redirect. So they're very entrepreneurial. We will get into that in one of our episodes. It will talk about the different businesses they have started and how, they're not waiting until I grow up. Like we always said, when I grow up, I want to be A, B, and C. They're like, why do I have to wait? They're the now generation. We called the millennials the me generation. Before that was the latchkey generation. Well, now we have the now generation. I want it now. I don't want to wait for it. And it's very funny because I've watched that in my own son, and he's doing all these things. I mean, he got his AA by the time most people were graduating from high school. He had a BA by the time I think he was 18 or 19. He had a master's degree by the time he was 20. And he was like, I'm not doing enough. I'm like, what are you talking about? like most people, I didn't get my master's degree until I was in my 30s. And so I'm like, what are you talking about? And so, it's just kind of it's a funny mentality, but we have to work through it. Higher expectations. They are seeing, especially when it comes to technology, they are seeing a lot of things that can happen right on the internet. And then they're wondering, why is that not happening for me? They have high expectations of themselves. They have high expectations of those that are teaching them. There's a lot of that. And, they're ready to go into the workplace a lot sooner than the millennials were. They really do want to work. A lot of people get frustrated because they don't fully understand this generation. And the reality is if you can get them involved, if you can get them buy-in, they are more likely to follow you 100% down the road with you, work hard. It's just, there's some things we have to overcome, and I'm going to talk about that. And hopefully I didn't just hit my mic. I apologize for that. I'm used to it being higher when I do my podcast. Okay, so here's one of those things I was talking about. And this is something that we're really experiencing in the classroom right now. I'm sure you're experiencing it in your workplace, and you probably don't understand it, but I'm going to tell you exactly what it is. Much of Generation Z's identity is based on what others think of them. So, there's kind of a mentality, if I can't see you, you can't see me. And so for that reason, and they'd rather take a 0 than actually admit that they can't do something. or to say they don't understand, or to ask a question. Like, they are fearful of being wrong, and they want to be right. They don't want to appear stupid. They think if I just ignore this, maybe it'll go away. And so you can understand that that's terrible in the classroom, because, we have students that don't turn in work. It's terrible in the workplace because you're like, why didn't you do that? Well, I didn't know what to do. They don't want to admit that. And so they quit. I actually had somebody come in the morning so scared out of their mind that they went to lunch and they never came back. These kind of things happen, and it's so frustrating. So they are afraid of being wrong. So we'll get into, in one of the weeks, we'll get into how do we overcome this? How do we help them through this? And here's the thing. They are physically different. Okay, so we've always said, well, that generation's different. Well, we all go through the same things. But when I say they're different, they are physically different. Okay, physically different. Now, there was a book put out by Carr. It's called The Shallows. Highly recommend it. Where he tested primates and looked at them and how their brains were responding to technology, and technology actually rewires the brain. So imagine for a second that your brain is being rewired while it's developing, because somebody's brain is not fully developed until they're like 25 or something like that. And so if they're on technology from like a really early age, their brains are being rewired while their brains are still developing. So when we say they're different, they're like physically different. And because of this, they get rewarded with, chemicals that come into their brain every time they do what we call task skipping, going from one thing to another. So that's why their attention span is so low, because that dopamine, that you get when you eat chocolate or have sex, it like goes through their brains every time they do something different. Every time they task skip is what we call that. And so it's something we have to, obviously overcome. And like I said, in this channel, we will get into those things. According to the studies that I read many years ago, 50% of the population was kinesthetic, 40% of the population was visual, and only 10% were auditory. So if you don't know what that is, kinesthetic means you use your hands, and visual means you watch it, and then auditory, you listen and you learn. Well, when I did my study, 90% of the people I studied were kinesthetic and 0% were auditory. Either way, 10% or 0%, we don't have much of a population that's auditory. So that means if we're just saying something, chances are they are not hearing us. They are not totally taking in that information. And so we have to make them part of the process, have them doing something, especially you teachers. Stop just lecturing at them. You've lost them in 7 seconds. You got to get them doing something. Believe it or not, most of my people I studied and interviewed, they said they loved handwritten notes. I would never have thought of that, but they do. They said it keeps me on track. They don't like the, fill in the word in the middle of the sentence, because then they're like turning to someone and saying, what they say, I missed it, what they say. But they do like having some sort of handwritten notes where they can write that down. So if you're an employer and you're trying to get them to understand something, have them have a notepad with them and write down the notes as you're talking to them. It'll keep them listening. If you are a pastor, have notes in your services again. I know that sounds old school, but believe it or not, they actually enjoy that. I was really surprised. Teachers, absolutely, you got to have handwritten notes. I actually give them the final on the first day. They don't know that, but I'm like, if you take really good notes, you'll do really good. And if they turn in, they write down all the answers, they literally have the final in front of them on the first day of class. And so it really can help them. Like I said, our squirrels, they can go up to 4 minutes if we can give them the acorn. And so we just have to find the acorn. I think the Generation Z is very exciting. We just have to understand them. I have a quote from a Gen Zer that said, Generation Z has taught each other how to process and think, and they find value in emotions, which can be a stark contrast to older generations. In order for them to respect your opinion, they have to know their way of seeing the world is valid. I found that very interesting. And so this person I interviewed, he really said it was important that we understand the world in which they are giving us, that often adults, we're like, don't want to listen to the younger generation. And I think there's value in it. If you've got a board of people that, are kind of speaking into your company or your church, you need to have people of all ages on that. Older people have value, younger people have value. We all have value. And so you want to make sure that you are respecting the younger generation, because they see the world differently, and they are a marketing, golden marketing, gem in your box. I don't know how to say that, but they want to be more than a spectator. If you've got somebody who is just a spectator in your company, or they're just making copies, they're probably not going to stay with you very long. They won't be very loyal. This is not baby boomers where they sign up for a job, stay in it 30 years, take that retirement check. They just don't do that. It started with my wonderful generation, Next Gen. We were the first people to kind of do that. And so we just, the loyalty is just not there anymore. So one way you can get them loyal, that make them buy into what you're doing, is make them part of the process. I cannot emphasize that more. This is so I want to tell you a story really quick. So I went to a lot of classes when I was doing my research. I would sit in the back of classes and I would watch them. And then I would usually take a student out of that class and interview them, sometimes more than one. So one of the classes I did was personal finance. And I watched him, and he was talking about how to get out of debt. And it was a really interesting, lecture. And so I spoke to one of the students afterwards. I said, so what'd you think of the lecture about how to get out of debt? And the person said, well, don't tell me how to get out of debt. Tell me how to never get into debt. And I find that so fascinating. That is such a mindset that they have. Like, they want to think about, how do I do what I'm doing now? Don't tell me what to do about something in the future. I just found that fascinating. They are used to commenting, liking, upvoting, uploading. They need to be part of the process. I don't know, Tim Elmore, I actually met him a while back ago. He writes a book all about generational differences. And that is one of the things that he points out, is that they are so part of the marketing world that they need to be part of their working world, their educational world. And parents, I cannot emphasize more that if you are not allowing your kid to be part of what is happening in your home, you're missing the boat. They would probably really respond well if you allowed them to do that. So I have a list of questions that they often ask. They ask questions like, need for instant gratification. If I can find out anything I want in the click of a button in minutes, how am I supposed to wait for you? Need for purpose. There is this entire world out there that I want to get to. Why should I care about this? Need for active learning. I am distracted by multiple texts, emails, social media, etc. How can I pay attention if I'm not part of the process? And the third one, need for technology. Technology is not just around me, it is part of my identity. So why is it not part of my job or my learning? Parents, you keep taking technology away from your kids, and it is part of their identity. Rather than take it away from them, try to find better ways of using it. It's funny because my husband and I are really big into helping people find their gifting, find that thing that they can do really well. We often help people with these kind of things. And my husband ran into someone whose son is just brilliant. He's a young kid. He's probably like 8 or 9 years old, and which means he's probably an alpha. But he was like, he's really smart, but he wants to be on technology. And my husband's like, well, then have him start learning computer coding. Like, imagine an 8-year-old who starts learning computer coding, or learn how to, play an instrument or something else. Do you see what I'm saying? So turn the technology into a good thing where they're learning something that maybe they'll value later on in life. You start them young, it could be amazing for them later. Sorry, I hit the mic again. Apologize. And if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, chances are they are just fearful of that. So we need to find ways to redirect them and understand them. And that is it for me today. I hope you'll come and subscribe to this channel. I will have ways to overcome these different things. This is just kind of an overview of who they are and what we can do. And so I hope you'll subscribe to this channel. Also, I wanted to point out really quickly, if you would like it, and I've got it covered up, I shouldn't, get a copy of my book, Teaching Squirrels. It says, Teaching Squirrels, How to Reach Generation Z and Create Lasting Engagement. It is all of my research, and it also talks about other generations. So if you ever wondered about your generation, chances are you're in here, because I think I started all the way back at the Silence or the Greatest Generation, something like that. So chances are you're in here too. So check that out on Amazon or Barnes & Noble and get a copy for yourself. All right, you all take care, and I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.